Wanna talk? So let's talk. Yeah. Talk. You wanna talk? You gotta talk, you need to talk. News talk.
I talk, you talk to Solomon. I talk, you talk to Solomon. Yeah, let's talk to Solomon. Talk to Solomon.
Welcome, my friends, to a special edition of Talk to Solomon. Joining me here in the studio is my friend Jennifer Cobb. She's dedicated much of her life, certainly the last 5 years, to a particular issue. We also have Dr. Alan Keyes still with us. Jennifer, tell people about your project to save the babies.
Save the Babies is a project that I have been working on. Last week we had Save the Children's Day. It's all under the theme of Save the Babies. We had Save the Children's Day, which was a concerned citizen discussion about the children who have died from abuse and were under the watch of the Department of Children's Services in Indiana.
So basically we had, and you're going to tell us about some situations, where a child was taken from his or her parents under the guidance or under the authority of this department. That child was then put into the care of and control of a person or persons, and the result has been, in some cases, well, the actual death of the child, correct?
Absolutely, yes. My first case was with a child by the name of Tajane Belly in 2007. Tajane was a CHINS case, Children in Need of Service case, when she was born. They took her out of her home, and then they placed the child back in, knowing that there were issues between the mother and the mother's boyfriend. And Tajane was killed by the mother's boyfriend in 2007 for defecating on herself.
And how old
that
was
was my
this child?
beginning. Tajane was 3 years old.
3 years old.
Yes.
And your feeling at that time was it was an outrage that they didn't do more investigation so as to be forewarned that this boyfriend had a history of violence, and to put that child where that boyfriend would have access to the child was irresponsible.
Yes, correctly. And they also knew that Charity had a very disturbed history, a childhood history of abuse herself.
The mother.
The mother. And Charity's her name, and Lawrence is the boyfriend. They're serving a considerable amount of prison time. My stance is that Charity got 35 years for criminal negligence, Class A felony, and Lawrence got 60 years for murder. But the Department of Children's Services, they got off scot-free. The argument was that Charity knew that Tajane was in harm's way. Well, the Department of Children's Services knew as well that Tajane was in harm's way.
All right, now let's take a little break here because I want to bring Dr. Keyes in. Dr. Keyes, you're a smart man, an educated man. You've seen an awful lot. But the reality is it comes down to one-on-one. Should we, can we, how do we trust authority for the very life of a child?
Well, Stan, I think one of the great challenges that we're facing now because of what we have done to the social system in our country, and I mean by that the total picture of it, is that we're trying to handle with bureaucracy what can, at the end of the day, only be handled by responsible human individuals acting from a place of responsibility that is informed by love. Nothing else is going to fit the bill. We keep trying to fill the void we're creating through the spiritual, moral, emotional destruction of family life. And it's not working. And I don't just mean the formal structure of families, male, female, mother, father, child. No. How can I put this? Over the course of centuries of human existence, societies realize that you have to devote a major amount of social effort to the business of shaping the heart and mind of individuals to take their family responsibilities seriously. That was one of the reasons, I think, by the way, why there was a whole ethos that developed around sexual interaction. An ethos that didn't necessarily apply to everyone, but applied to everyone who wanted to be treated as a responsible and respectable person in a society. And if you wanted to be treated that way, then you had to develop characteristics that would make you a fit parent, somebody who would then be able to raise up children with results that were not abusive. Because that's where you get that. I was thinking as your guest described the situation, the outcome, isn't it ironic, holds the individual responsible with the greater penalty, right?
Absolutely.
It's as if in that punitive side of it, they're acknowledging the truth, that children have to be raised on the basis of individual responsibility for their welfare, right? And yet the overall structure of our whole society and social ethos now is one that destroys the capacity for individual responsibility and tries to put the burden on an impersonal bureaucracy that at the end of the day can't handle it. So I think this is just one of those situations that results in a deep tragedy precisely because we're no longer willing to accept the simple natural truth. Child rearing is best done one-on-one, right? It is best done with an intimate relationship between parent and child. And that means, for instance, the environment of this episode with a boyfriend. Who the heck is a boyfriend? I know you can give me an answer to that, but the truth of the matter is, where a child's welfare is concerned, the very phrase boyfriend suggests somebody who does not have the individual relationship, character, responsibility that is going to be best for that child. And so you're going to tell me, let's go on with the promiscuous sex and the sick ethos and destroy the sense of sacredness and responsibility surrounding the act of procreation and its consequences. And then the bureaucracy is going to step in and do what? Do what they have done. Show that the failure of individual care and loving responsibility cannot be compensated for by some bureaucratic entity. I think it's just, it's not just a tragedy, it's a tragedy that has a point, that has a lesson. And the lesson shouldn't be we're going to hold the individual responsible by punishment, but we're not, as a society, going to treat individuals as if they are going to be responsible when we educate them, when we are dealing with them in the way of their responsibility for the consequences of their sexual actions and so forth. This doesn't work, Stan. I think we're in deep contradiction with ourselves and reality.
Well said. All right, now let me get back to Jennifer. Jennifer, this was the case that started your commitment. By the way, do you have a website that people can go to?
I don't have a website, but I do have an email address.
Email. All right, we'll put the email up on the, what is the email?
Blessed, B-L-E-S-S-E-D, the Meek, 2004 at yahoo.com.
Blessed the Meek, 2004 at yahoo.com. All right, we'll put that on the screen so people know. All right, so this one situation, I remember you called me way back then.
Yes.
Some other situations have developed since. Tell us about some of those.
Well, right now I'm living in Seattle, Washington. And because my corporation is nationwide, and I was doing some research on the internet about another case when I came across another case of a little girl named Carmen Ellis. Carmen, like Tajane, is 3 years old. She was killed by the mother's boyfriend for defecating on herself as well. And that prompted me, it was for me as if Tajane was saying from her spiritual realm, have you forgotten about me? Have you forgotten about the cause? And so I started doing quite a bit of research over the number of children who have died from abuse since 2007 and were under the watch of the Department of Children's Services. And the
Here in Indiana or
here,
nationwide?
right in
Or here in
Indiana.
Okay.
Yes, one state at a time. Here, right in Indiana, it's been 35, and I'm going to say 35 plus children who have died under the helm of DCS since
So you're saying
2007.
since 2007, in 5 years, that's basically 7 per year.
Average.
That's one every
Yes.
other month, for all practical purposes.
Yes.
Children that were under the protection, under the tutelage, under the responsibility of the Department of Human Services, and every other month we had one of those children murdered by someone in the home where the Department of Human Services had allowed that child to be.
Yes, ranging from the ages of 18 days old to 16 years old. 18 days. Couldn't make past 18 days. Yes.
Now, it's a startling number. It's a breathtaking number for those people who have a heart and those people who know God. And by the way, if you don't know God, I don't know how to talk to you. But for those who know God and have a heart, the fact that a child is being murdered is unacceptable. But that a child is being murdered in an environment where the authorities place that child, that's breathtaking and all bad.
There's a child named Christian Choate who was beaten, lived in a cage, died in a cage. When he died, his father buried him, and then he moved to Kentucky. DCS had been over there at least a dozen times. They didn't find the body until 2 years later.
Did they get him back? Did they go get him and prosecute him?
I'm not certain the status of that, but that was part of my my research when I started researching the 35 children.
All right. Obviously, you've uncovered something that is unconscionable. What is your strategy? What is it that you're? I know you have. What you have an event coming up, right?
Yes, I do.
Tell us about that.
This Saturday, I'm going to have a day of prayer.
This coming Saturday,
This
which will
coming
be
Saturday, which is November 17th,
November 17th.
at a church called the Promised Land at 802 Edgemont Avenue in Indianapolis.
All right.
And it will honor the 34 children and to bring public awareness of this atrocity.
All right, let's go back to Dr. Keys. Dr. Keys, you've seen a lot in your many, many years and your observation. Does this surprise you? Does this shock you?
Well, first of all, it just deeply grieves me. I think it must deeply grieve everyone who hears about it. And it especially grieves me because, I don't know, I've been sitting here thinking, Stan, about the cause that's described, right? You're going to kill a babe, a child, an infant, 3 years old, whatever, because they soiled themselves. Now, yeah. Some part of me does not comprehend how one could react with rage to a child in that circumstance because of my own experience as a parent from the time they're really small, right? And it's almost like the accidents that happen from the time they're young are part of the anointing of your parenting. It's part of what reminds you of the depth of service that you're willing to give. And it's one of those little discoveries you make in the course of taking care of your child, that things that seemed like, and in other contexts would certainly seem like they were somehow, irritating or demeaning or this and that and the other thing, are instead part of the affirming ethos of love that binds you to the child, and that where you discovered that part of yourself, which has no self to it, which is just all about giving the child whatever service is needed for health and for well-being and for what is going to strengthen that child. And I think it's God's way that they come into the world so little and helpless, because he's training us up. He's giving us time to get in touch with the parts of ourselves that are patient and loving and gentle on account of our willingness to give help to that helplessness, which then makes it impossible to take offense at what the child does. And later, as they get older, and you do have to, apply some discipline sometimes in terms of being sterner in reaction to what your children do. It both is hard because of that gentleness you've learned in dealing with them, right? And it also means that there are boundaries you never cross with your children, because some part of that sort of restraint that they teach you when they're helpless and innocent stays with you. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, what is it that would then put a child in a situation where that training hasn't taken place? And it's natural, I think. It's part of God's plan for us, that our hearts get prepared this way to deal with our children. And I think it stems because we've allowed this deeply sacred relationship that constitutes the foundation of the family. It is a matter of feelings of the body and feelings of the vanity and feelings of the pleasure and this and that and the other thing. It's no longer a matter of really finding those places of the heart that God means to introduce us to as we get to know the child, but also get to know ourselves through the service that we give to our children. And that's why I guess I stood back here and I said, boyfriend, it is one of those things that we ought to reflect on, because that's not the same thing as saying father. That's not the same thing as saying someone who is in that relationship with the child because of what is rooted in heart and spirit and God at the end of the day. And I think the real repairing that's needed here is not just some bureaucratic fix, because I don't think that'll work. I think we need to, as a society, go about the business of repairing our understanding of the fundamental relationship that then calls the child into the world. See, our disrespect for that and for all that it implies then leads to these situations where some boyfriend is brought into relation with a child, and that boyfriend is not, in point of fact, part of the universe of love that ought to be lifting that child up to care and to strength as it grows up. I don't know. It's more than grieving. I think it's a stunning kind of sense of loss in terms of what we're losing as a society, which it has taken thousands of years of human experience to build up, and we're just throwing it away.
Well said. All right, let's go back to, you have the event coming up Saturday.
Yes.
People can email you. You can email them back, and your email is up on the screen. Are there some other items or issues or individuals that you'd like to bring to our attention?
Well, yes. Even some biological parents, fathers, are not fit or have psychological issues that can put their children in danger. And case in point, I have a client who is in Indiana, whose son, he's 13 now, from the age of 3 on up, he has been sodomized by his father and grandfather. And the father used to be the chief officer for the juvenile probation office, and the grandfather used to be a a sheriff in the police department. So I believe that they are protecting, it's a very long story, but I believe that they are protecting these men in point because of their prior status. But two, the boy's name is Noah. I have him right here. Noah reported that he went into his father's office, and there were other little boys who were naked, and the father and others were taking pictures of him as well as the other little boys. So there is surmounting proof that there is a major child pornography ring going on in the state of Indiana, with either government officials either knowing about it and protecting or being participants in it, including our current governor, Mitch Daniels.
Well, you know, I don't know about the particular case other than you've
It's
told
okay.
me about it for years. But I do know that we just had a situation where the voice of Elmo on Sesame Street has just been accused and admitted that he had a sexual relationship with a young man, 16. Now, the young man says it was before he was 16. This man from the voice of Elmo, I think his name is Clash, but I'm not 100% sure. But anyway, that in our society, somehow we're coming to the point that there's no right and no wrong. There's no unacceptable and therefore no acceptable, that it is okay to have any kind of sex and okay to have it with whomever. And that if you can convince yourself or convince others that someone wants to participate, we have forgotten all about this concept that a child is, one, a gift from God, and two, the responsibility of all of society as, and mostly for the parent of that child, and that you're supposed to protect that child. That child's innocence, I guess, is the best way to say it. And that anyone in or out of government, anyone in or outside of a family would do such a thing, would allow such a thing, or would not report such a thing is beyond the pale. Is that not your point?
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
All right. We have just a few minutes left. Is there anything else that you would like to share with our audience? Again, your website is?
My email is blessedthemeek2004@yahoo.com. And for those who live in the Indianapolis area or even Indiana area, I'm encouraging you to come to the day of prayer. It will be an absolutely wonderful memorial service
when?
for our babies.
It'll
start at 5 o'clock.
In the evening.
In the evening.
And is, again, the address?
802 Edgemont Avenue in Indianapolis.
And the name of the church?
The Promised Land.
The Promised Land.
Yes.
All right. Well, Jennifer, thank you so much for what you're
thank
doing.
You.
It's our pleasure. Dr. Keys, thank you for participating in this discussion. You've given some wonderful insight. And I would like to ask all of you to prayerfully consider what's going on here. Now, I can tell you this. I know this. Jennifer hasn't said it. She doesn't take a dime from any of her clients. She does this for love of children. Any kind of support you could lend to her would be most appreciated. Just email her and she can let you know how you might support what she is doing. On that note, I want to wish you all a good evening. Anything else final, Jennifer?
That's it. Thank you very much.
Dr. Keys, thank you for your participation.
Well, thank you for having me, and I wish Jennifer all the blessings of the Lord on the work that you're doing, because I think that learning once again to respect our children as not instruments of our pleasure or our ambition or our vanity, but really as the precious ends in God's will that they are intended to be. I think that is what's really going to help address a lot of these tragedies, and always has. Society has always been plagued with this when children are treated as instruments instead of as ends created by God to remind us of the true destiny of our own spirits.
Thank you, sir. Good night, America.
Thanks
for being a
sir.
part.